Most people have never had to deal with a custody evaluation, and here it is right in front of you. How do you prepare? I've got some experience, and I'll share those specific tips with you today. I've got 5 tips for you. This comes from my experience working as a child custody evaluator. I think some of you viewers will know this if you've watched the channel a little bit. I did this for probably 12, 13 years, where I was appointed by the court to go into a family where there was a divorce occurring and figure out what needed to happen for the kids. I would make recommendations to the judge, and the judge would decide. Now, if you can avoid getting into that whole litigation system, highly recommend it. We've done another video recently on some strategies for child custody mediation. Look for that video here on the channel, and if you can go that route, it's so much better because the evaluation process tends to be very disruptive. It can get very lengthy. Typically, when I was doing these child custody evaluations, we would plan on about 3 to 4 months of a process that we would go through to evaluate both homes, both parents, all of the kids, compile all that information back into a report that would go to the judge. That takes a little while to do, but I have heard of cases that have taken sometimes a year or longer to resolve once it gets into a child custody evaluation. So this is not an insignificant event, and it's something you want to be prepared for and that you can approach in a way that's going to serve you and your family the best. So I've got 5 tips for you today coming from an old child custody evaluator. Here's what I'm thinking. Tip number 1, get yourself into a good place mentally, physically, psychologically. You need to be in a good place. Now let's look at different aspects of that. Mentally, divorce, child custody proceedings, this is hard and it takes a toll on people. So you're going to need to take care of yourself in a lot of ways. You want to make sure you get enough exercise, you're getting enough sleep, that you're eating a balanced diet. It's really easy during these stressful times to let all of that stuff go. This is not going to serve you well for a lot of the obvious reasons, but also in terms of child custody. Think about my position as an evaluator. I got to figure out what's going to be best for these kids. If I've got a parent who is so strung out and wiped out and clobbered, can I trust them really to show up and take care of these kids well? You got to get yourself into a good place. Psychologically, I've said this so many times, and I know it might irritate some of you, but just listen for a minute. Divorce brings out the worst in people, and you are not immune from this. Probably it's going to do the same to you, and there's a lot of reasons why that happens. Psychologically, you are responsible for how you show up. And if you show up as this bitter, angry, divorcing person, that's not going to impress anyone. And as an evaluator, I have some real concerns about that because people get so caught up in their own issues that they can't see the children's issues. You've got to be in a good place physically. And I mean more than just your fitness and your physical health. I mean, where do you live? Do you have accommodations for these children that are appropriate and enriched and provide for the needs that the child has? This is no small task because financially or economically you might be in a position right now where you can't get into the kind of home that you ideally would like to have. Yeah, I get that. Also, you need to understand that if you're living in a minivan down by the river, probably that's not going to impress the evaluator. So you got to get yourself in a good place. Everything that means, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in terms of your living quarters, get yourself into a good place. That is number 1 for a reason. Pay some attention to that. Okay, here's tip number 2. Become familiar with the rules and the laws regarding child custody in your jurisdiction. You don't have to become a judge or an attorney. I'm not saying you have to know the law to that level, but you need to understand what the context is that you're up against. My practice is in Utah. As I worked in the Utah court system, I had to know, as an evaluator, I had to know a law. It's a rule. It's in the Judicial Rules of Administration. It's called Rule 4903. Rule 4903 dictates how the courts have to handle a child custody matter, what the judge has to consider, for example, before he makes a ruling on child custody. Rule 4903 is something that guided my efforts as an evaluator because I had to answer in my report each of the points that are listed in that rule. This is why it's so important to know the rules for your particular jurisdiction. Talk to an attorney who is familiar with family law. You probably already have one if you're getting into a child custody evaluation. If you don't have one, I highly recommend that you consult with or hire an attorney. This is something that you don't want to do on your own. Although in most states you have the right to represent yourself, that's not always the best idea. It's kind of like dentistry. I believe that we should get the professionals involved to get the best outcomes. Consult with an attorney. At the very least, go to a legal library somewhere and do a little research on what the rules and the laws are regarding child custody in your jurisdiction. You need to know this. This is your playing field. Now let's get a little more psychological. For tip number 3, let me set this up by explaining a dynamic that happens often in a child custody matter. This is something I actually got kind of tired of, and I know that the judges do too. They tire of this. If a judge is working all day long and she gets another case that says, oh my gosh, this parent is being so evil and bad, she's going to roll her eyes and say, oh, here we go again. The tip number 3 is don't get sucked into the good parent, bad parent fight. This is not about proving that the other parent is bad or evil. Now, I know. You're probably thinking right now, oh, but in my case, yeah, I know. Everybody's got a special case. But as a professional, I can tell you that evaluators and judges get sick and tired of that fight, that dynamic. Here's the bottom line. Good people end up divorcing. Have you noticed that? But one reason divorce brings out the worst in people is because of a psychological switch that happens in people's mind. It's called cognitive dissonance. We even have a word for it in psychology. Cognitive dissonance is when what you believe and what you experience aren't matching, and so you have to make an adjustment. And usually it's easier to adjust your belief about something. Here's where the dissonance happens. Psychologically, it's not okay for me to be divorced from a really awesome person. So my mind switches it all up. Now I'm divorced from an evil, nasty, horrible, awful person. Oh, that's okay. See, that resolves the cognitive dissonance in my mind. Problem is, now I'm treating that person as a bad, evil, horrible, negative, master manipulator, spawn of Satan kind of a person. All right, I've actually heard those terms, okay? And I just have to chuckle a little bit inside because I'm like, oh, they got sucked into it, didn't they? Yeah, they did. Don't get sucked in. Now, having said that, you will. You'll get sucked in. You will get sucked in. And the court is a terrible place to solve family problems. I say that with all due respect to the amazing judicial system that we have. But it's set up in an adversarial way, which means it's me against you, and who's right instead of what's right. And you will get sucked into this because you'll feel like you need to go in there and represent yourself as the good parent and that other person is the bad one. And it's going to irritate and annoy the professionals that you're working with. Be aware of that. It's much better for you to go into this with some compassion and kindness and empathy. Acknowledge that, yeah, we got divorced. We went separate directions. We don't agree on things. But that person really is a good parent, is a good person. And honestly, that other parent loves your children, okay? I can say that with a whole lot of confidence, knowing that there are some exceptions, and please don't blow up my comments with, well, I'm a special case. Just understand that the vast majority of parents out there who are involved in a custody litigation love their kids. They want to do the right thing. And your ex is probably a good person who has love for your children. Okay, now don't argue with me on that. Just consider it. Okay, now we're going to go to tip number 4, and here it is. You know what? As I say this, when I'm thinking, well, duh, but I have to say it because people don't actually consider this when they get into a highly contested custody situation. Here it is. Be truthful and honest and transparent and kind. There you go. Do we need to talk about this? Do not lie. It's going to come back and bite you. You be truthful and honest about everything. And don't try to represent yourself as something that you're not. We'll see through that too. I always did extensive psychological testing on both parents. And by the time I get through my psychological test battery and all the observations and all of the collateral interviews, I get a pretty good sense for who this person is, what they're like. Don't try to represent yourself as this when you're that. Okay, just be honest. Own who you are and where you are and what's up for you in your life. You've got weaknesses. I know that. As an evaluator, as a psychologist, I know. But people are hesitant to share those things or to acknowledge those things because, oh, that might put me in a bad light with the custody evaluator or the court. Yeah, it might. But it's better to be honest than it is to falsely represent yourself in a way that's going to come back and bite you later. Now, I also said transparency. Don't try to hide stuff. We'll find it. I know I'm not like, the FBI or the CIA and I've got all these investigative skills. No, I'm just a psychologist who has some insights and intuitions that come from years of clinical practice. When you get in with a custody evaluator, they're going to be able to see through a lot of the superficial, phony stuff. So just be transparent. It's better to go in and say, hey, I've got some issues with this. Here's what I'm doing to work on them. And then be kind. The last thing I want to hear as a custody evaluator is all the bad stuff about the other parent. I know that you've got some concerns and those need to be represented in some way. I get that. Do it with kindness. Share it as a concern and not an accusation. Get some coaching if you need to so that you can handle this thing with diplomacy. That's going to go a whole lot farther for you than the bitter, angry, vitriolic stuff that all of the professionals involved are sick and tired of hearing anyway. So you be kind, transparent, honest, and truthful. That's tip number 4. Now tip number 5. And I've saved this one till last. It probably should go first because this is the whole reason we're here in the first place. Here's tip number 5. You keep the child's interest as the primary concern. We have to focus on the interests of the children. As an evaluator, that's my charge. From the court's perspective, they have to take care of everyone's rights to a certain extent, but the children are the primary focus for that judge, for the evaluator, for the professionals who are involved. They want to do the right thing by the kids. So if your focus is there too, sometimes you got to swallow hard and say, you know what? Everything that I want is simply what I want. What's best for my kids? And honestly, it might be best for your kids to spend a little more time with their other parent. It might be. Be open to that. Let's get out of the anxiety and fear of, oh, I'm going to lose time or I'll have fewer days or whatever. Stop counting days and start looking at your kids and what they need, especially as kids get a little older. What we want as parents is not often what's in their best interest. And if we're counting days, we might not be paying attention to what their needs are as much. That's tip number 5. You stay focused on those kids. The interest of the children is of paramount importance here. Hey, you keep those things in mind, you're going to do just fine. Manage your own anxiety around this, and if some of the other videos here can help you with that, please get connected.